Pacts are your most powerful tool in Soulframe combat, so let's take a deep dive into how they work. Today we'll look at every pact currently in the game and how virtues affect each pact ability. Before we dig into the individual pacts, there are a few things we need to know about pacts in general. Your pact is a representation of your envoy's relationship with another entity or perhaps faction within Midrath. We don't yet have a ton of lore explaining the specifics here, but we know that pacts manifest as armor on your envoy's Fey-touched right arm. Each pact grants you 3 abilities to use in combat. The in-game display shows each of these abilities as aligned with a specific virtue. The only significance for this in-game combat has to do with Smite. When you use your soul mode key to tear a colored soul from an enemy, that soul will recharge the ability aligned with the virtue that matches that color. Each ability can be affected by every virtue, but they aren't always affected by all of them. Roughly speaking, Courage affects the strength of an ability, Spirit affects its duration, and Grace affects its range. Each pact also has 2 unique passives in its upgrades, which usually enhance that pact's abilities or complement its playstyle. With that out of the way, let's look at our pacts. First up, we have Tethren. This is your starting pact when you choose Courage, or you can purchase it from Fen Yotar of the Kith of Kings faction for 100 standing when you reach rank 3. Equipping Tethren will give you +5 Courage and +80 life. Tethren's first ability is Fellust, a buff that will cause your weapon to deal increased damage with every successful attack. Despite some in-game text saying this exclusively applies to melee attacks, Fellust also works on ranged attacks, kicks, and unarmed strikes. As you'll see, it's a very fun ability for ranged gameplay, so I hope we get to keep it. Fellust does not have a duration that can be increased by Spirit, but instead has 5 charges. Each attack will consume 1 charge if you hit the target, or 2 charges if you miss or if your attack is blocked. Throwing a melee weapon also seems to consume 2 charges, but this is probably a bug. When all 5 charges are consumed, the ability will have a cooldown timer before you can use it again. Each time you successfully hit with an attack buffed by Fellust, you will gain a damage multiplier that scales with your Courage. This means that your first successful attack with Fellust active will hit for your normal weapon damage, but every additional hit will have a damage bonus that stacks up to 4 times for your 5th hit. You must hit successfully to stack this bonus, so if you miss or an attack is blocked, the charge will be consumed without increasing your damage multiplier, and the ability will still go on cooldown once all 5 charges are consumed. The multiplier you get from Fellust is currently quite strong, so you don't need to dump a bunch of virtue points into Courage to make this ability worthwhile. Just don't miss. Tethren's second ability is Call of the Ancients, and it will aggro nearby enemies and give you a damage bonus. It's also supposed to provide some kind of armor or damage reduction, but this does not currently work and may rely on an armor stat that we should be getting in Preludes 10. The damage buff scales with Courage, but Spirit does not currently affect the buff's duration. Call of the Ancients will not alert unalerted enemies, and it seems to function as more of an aura than a single taunt. You will continue to draw aggro from enemies near you for as long as the ability remains active, although the range does not currently scale with Grace. Tethren's third ability is Clash, which deals stagger to nearby enemies and reduces stagger taken. Stagger is represented by a white bar around an enemy's icon, and different weapons deal different amounts of stagger. The amount of stagger that Clash deals will scale with Courage, but the range doesn't scale with Grace. Clash will also increase the number of times you can block an attack before getting knocked over, but this aspect of the ability does not seem to scale either. Tethren's unique upgrades are Conquer and Last Stand. Conquer causes you to regain some health when you kill an enemy. The amount is a flat quantity based on how many points you have in the upgrade, not a percentage of your max health, and it will not trigger on smites or on kills with unique finisher animations. Last Stand increases the speed of all your attacks when your health is below 45%, and it scales with the number of points you put in the upgrade. Our next pact is Oscelda. This is your starting pack when you choose Spirit, or you can purchase it from Avocat of the Alka's Children faction for 100 standing when you reach rank 3. Equipping Oscelda will grant you 9 Spirit but no additional life. Oscelda's first ability is Bestone, which fires a projectile that petrifies enemies near where it hits. The range of this freeze scales with Grace, but it can only affect a maximum of 4 enemies as long as one of them is a direct hit. Indirect hits can only freeze 3. A direct hit with Bestone also deals damage that scales with Spirit, capping at 40 damage. Attacking a petrified enemy will break the freeze and also deal extra damage to that foe. The amount of damage scales with Courage. The amount of time that enemies will remain frozen if you do not attack them scales with Spirit, but you cannot refresh this by using Bestown on them again while they are still petrified. Instead, the projectile will register as an attack, ending the petrification and dealing the ability's breaking damage. Oscelda's second ability is Elder Bloom, which will create a plant on the ground at your location that heals all allies within range. The heal seems to be around 25 life that ticks about every half second. The radius of the heal is larger than the animation implies, but it does not scale with grace. In fact, at the moment, it doesn't seem like virtues affect any aspect of Elder Bloom, which I hope is a bug. Oscelda's third ability is Phantom Flock, which fires a projectile that causes a flock of birds to attack the enemy nearest wherever it hits. Like Bestown, the projectile itself deals a maximum 40 damage on a direct hit, scaling with Spirit. The flock can also affect enemies nearby, and the duration of its attack scales with Spirit. The flock will try to follow one target until its duration expires. If your target dies, the flock will lock on to the next closest target in range. The amount of damage the birds deal scales with Courage, but the radius of the flock does not scale with Grace. Oscelda's unique passives are Creeping Thorn and Vernal Pool. Creeping Thorn will give you a chance to petrify enemies when they hit you, but the petrification does not currently deal damage over time as the description suggests it should. Instead, it seems to use the same code as Bestown, because casting Bestown on an enemy frozen by Creeping Thorn will have the same effect as if they had been frozen by Bestown. Vernal Pool reduces cooldown for all of your abilities when you're standing in water, but this passive has a bug that causes your Elder Bloom recharge to get stuck if you're in a group and not the host. Otherwise, Vernal Pool is quite strong, especially since Elder Bloom normally won't recharge until the plant disappears, but Vernal Pool will cause it to begin recharging immediately when you stand in water. Only certain types of water count, though, so it is still a little bit buggy, unless that's intended. Our next pact is Sirin. This is your starting pact when you choose Grace, or you can purchase it from Lady Diora of the Silent Rose faction for 100 standing when you reach rank 3. Equipping Sirin will give you plus 5 Grace and plus 40 life. Sirin's first ability is Pictrix Powder, which fires a projectile that crowd controls enemies in range of where it hits and causes those enemies to take more stagger. The range of the CC scales with Grace, but its duration does not scale with Spirit. Enemies take damage when they are first affected by Pictrix Powder, and while the amount scales with Courage, it is very small. Finishers on enemies affected by Pictrix Powder are pretty buggy. They'll work on some enemy types, but not all of them. Sirin's second ability is Trick of the Light, which will summon a decoy that taunts nearby enemies and then explodes. The duration the decoy lasts before exploding does scale with Spirit, but once the decoy is approached by an enemy, it will explode in about 4 seconds, regardless of how much of its duration remains. The explosion damage scales with Courage, and the radius scales with Grace. If you like to play solo, it's also worth noting that your decoy can activate pressure plates. Sirin's third ability is Glamour, which turns you into blue butterflies, making you functionally invisible. Approaching an enemy from behind while invisible will allow you to backstab them. Attacking, taking damage, sprinting, or jumping will end the invisibility, but dodging or interacting with an object will not. Bumping into an enemy while invisible will alert them, causing them to turn towards you, but it will not end the invisibility. Like Oscelda, direct hits from Sirin's projectiles deal damage that scales with your spirit and falls off with range. This damage caps at 40 damage at point-blank range. Sirin's unique passives are Shrouded and Pickpocket. Shrouded allows you to see enemies through walls using your soul mode key, and the range of its detection scales with the number of points you put in the passive. Pickpocket causes enemies near you to drop extra loot, and this triggers regardless of whether or not that enemy can detect your presence. Up next, we have Garren Rood, a pact you get as a reward for the Torment Stag Fable. Equipping Garren Rood will give you plus 5 Spirit and plus 20 life. Garren Rood's first ability is Torment, a single target ranged attack that will instantly deal damage and heal your envoy. The damage will scale with your Courage, but the range of the attack does not scale with Grace, and the healing will always bring you back to max health. Torment also ignores enemy damage reduction, but against bosses it will only deal 10% of its usual damage. Garren Rood's second ability is Behest, which crowd controls enemies around you when you cast it. The range scales with Grace, and the duration of the CC scales with Spirit. The description of the ability implies some kind of armor strip, but this currently seems to have no effect. Garren Rood's third ability is Stampede, which summons a stampede of spirit stags. The damage done by Stampede scales with Courage, and the duration of the stampede scales with Spirit, but its size does not scale with Grace. Garren Rood's unique passives are Herd Heart and Righteous. Herd Heart causes you to gain idle power when you heal yourself or an ally. Idols were removed in Preludes 9, so this passive currently has no effect, but I suspect it will work with the new moat mechanics coming in Preludes 10. Righteous is intended to reduce the cooldown on Behest with greater reduction as you invest more points, but it currently provides a maximum cooldown reduction with 1 point and then slightly less with each additional point. Our next pact is Orengall, which you receive after completing the She-Wolf Snared fable. If you're trying to start this quest, look for a red balloon. Equipping Orengall will give you +5 spirit and +20 life. Orengall's first ability is Werewalker, which will transfer your envoy's consciousness into a spirit wolf, allowing you to run faster for an amount of time that scales with your spirit. If you attack while in wolf form, whether that attack hits an enemy or not, your envoy will be transported to where your wolf is at that moment. Your wolf form's attack will be a bite, but the damage does not scale with your courage. The wolf has no health and thus cannot be killed, but if your envoy's body takes damage while you are in wolf form, or if the duration of the transformation expires, you will return to the location of your envoy's body. Orengall's second ability is Pack Hunter, which summons a spirit wolf ally to fight with you. The duration of this summon scales with spirit, and you can have up to 2 wolf allies at a time. The damage they do scales with your courage. Orengall's third ability is Howl, which buffs courage and smite chance for you and allies within a range that scales with grace. Howl doubles the courage of everyone affected by it, and this buff does not scale. Courage-attuned weapons will benefit from Howl, but not past their attunement cap. Howl will also cause enemy dogs to become allies, and the duration of this effect and Howl's buff both scale with spirit. Orengall's unique passives are Soulbound and Feral. Soulbound increases melee damage when allies are nearby, and it's affected by not only other players, but also spirit wolves, dogs under the influence of Howl, and even your sparrow. The buff also has a bug that makes it permanent, allowing it to stack infinitely as allies leave and return to your proximity. Feral causes Orengall herself to periodically show up and outright murder an enemy. It is supposed to proc more frequently with more points spent in the passive, but the scaling of these two abilities seems to be reversed right now. Points in Soulbound enable Feral and make it proc more frequently, while points in Feral enable Soulbound and strengthen its effect. Up next we have Ode Tempest, a pact currently available to purchase with 3,000 standing at rank 5 from both Silent Rose and Alka's Children. Equipping Ode Tempest will give you +5 courage and +50 life. Ode Tempest's first ability is Sizemore, which sends out a boulder that rolls like a bowling ball and then explodes, dealing damage that scales with courage. The size of the explosion scales with grace, but it does less damage as you get farther from the center. The boulder does damage as it rolls, and the amount of damage increases the longer it rolls. This duration scales with spirit. Ode Tempest's second ability is Astrosphere, which creates a dome that debuffs all enemies within it, causing them to take more damage. The damage multiplier does not scale, nor does it work on bosses, but it does affect both abilities and weapon attacks. The range of the dome scales with grace, and the dome damages enemies that enter it for an amount that scales with courage. Ode Tempest's third ability is Atmosphere. This ability creates a small ball that hovers near you and makes you immune to all attacks for a number of hits that scale with your courage, or until it expires after a duration that scales with your spirit. Other envoys can also receive this protection, and the range they need to be within scales with grace, but each ally gets their own sphere, so once they have the buff, they don't need to stay in range. Every time Atmosphere protects you from an attack, it will deal damage and stagger to the attacker. If you're standing within Astrosphere when you're hit, then Atmosphere will also proc an AoE damage burst that scales with the amount of damage it negated in the attack. Ode Tempest's unique passives are Lightning Strike and Gravitate. Lightning Strike causes the first strike of your ground finishers to deal extra damage, which can splash to nearby enemies. The amount of damage scales with the number of points you invest in the passive. Gravitate allows you to use your kick to grapple towards an enemy. Assigning 2 or more points in Gravitate causes your first melee attack immediately after a grapple to do additional voltaic damage that scales with the number of points invested in it. Our final pact is Mora's Hand, which can be purchased for 4,000 standing from Fen Jotar at rank 5 in the Kith of Kings faction, and at the moment you can receive it as a reward when you rank up to level 5. Equipping Mora's Hand gives you +5 courage and +20 life. Mora's Hand's first ability is Ignis Wrath, which sends out streaks of fire on the ground around you, dealing 25 damage to enemies they hit. It will also create an area of burning ground around you, which does not set enemies on fire, but does deal a small amount of damage over time and provide some CC. Ignis Wrath does not currently scale with any virtues. Mora's Hand's second ability is Ember. Getting hit by an enemy while Ember is active will trigger a radial attack around you that deals damage to enemies in range and sets them on fire. Neither the damage, the burning, nor the range of the AoE seem to scale with virtues, but Ember's duration scales with spirit. Mora's hand's third ability is Inferno, which throws a fireball dealing 20 damage to all enemies it hits. If an enemy is on fire when it's hit, Inferno will deal an additional 20 damage. Neither of these damage procs will scale with Courage, nor does the range scale with Grace. Enemies hit by Inferno will be set on fire and flung away from the blast. Mora's hand's unique passives are Hungry Flame and Smolder. Hungry Flame gives you a weapon damage buff when you are set on fire. This buff persists after the burning ends, lasting for a duration that seems to scale with Spirit. The strength of the buff scales with the amount of points you invest in the passive, although it seems to wane in strength before it fully expires. Smolder causes the enemy you're targeting to take damage every second. The amount of damage scales with the number of points you invest in the passive, and first proc 5 seconds after targeting an enemy. Each second, the amount of damage increases until it reaches 8 damage, at which point the enemy takes 100 damage and is set on fire in a flaming burst, which can also deal splash damage to nearby foes. So there we have it, every pact in Soulframe Preludes 9. I hope this guide helps you get the most out of your pacts in whatever way you decide to use them. Special thanks to PETA, Remiko, and everyone else in the Soulframe community who helped test packs and gather information. We all lift together. If you'd like to support my channel, please consider liking this video and subscribe if you'd like to see more Soulframe content. Until next time, happy hunting!